Hello, everyone. On today's episode, we're joined by Mike Umbro, founder and CEO of Californians for Energy and Science. We talk about what's happening on the ground in Kern County, California's regulatory landscape, the Sable offshore opportunity, refinery closures, and his groundbreaking GEOTES technology that turns depleted oil reservoirs into energy storage batteries. Please hit subscribe and join us in supporting independent energy. All right, enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the Local Energy Podcast. My name is Peter Brecht. I'm here with my co-host Wade Spear, and our guest today is Mike Umbro. He's an energy entrepreneur, investment banker, and the founder and CEO of Californians for Energy and Science. He's also a partner at Premier Resource Management, where he's pioneering geologic thermal energy storage, which we'll call GEOTES going forward from here. But basically, they're taking depleted oil reserves and turning them into massive batteries. He's passionately talking about California across, all ends. If you're talking about operators, producers, politics, he's there talking about it, and just the economic engine of Kern County. So, Mike, welcome to the show. The very first question we ask everyone that comes on the show is, "Did we land on the moon?"
Wow, great. That's a great intro and then great follow-up question that I was not expecting. I must not have seen any of the intros to your show. Did we land on the moon? I am gonna say yes, we landed on the moon. I
All right.
believe that, yeah, I believe that the United States landed on the moon, and I don't know whether we're gonna make it to Mars, but the moon, yes.
All right. Perfect. Perfect. And Mike, I've said it many times over, whether I've talked to people on Collide or even on the show, but you're truly one of the best spokespeople for the oil and gas industry in California. And now your project is actively taking shape. So what's the activity been like in Kern County lately? It seems like there's a glimmer of hope. I mean, I've seen some drilling rigs on your release out there, and I just love to hear about kind of firsthand what's going on out there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That was very I try to be vocal about what we're doing in California and what we're trying to do. The rigs were not actually on our lease, so those were around our lease.
Okay.
I actually went and visited the operator this week, Monday, and it was fun to see rigs in oil field, oil country. It's amazing how empty the skyline has been on the west side of Kern County, given what's there. So it's I have fun talking about it. It's not a fun topic, so I like to try to make it a fun topic. But it's definitely not fun times. But now it's a glimmer of hope. You know, the rigs are picking up. One is more than zero
Totally.
out there.
Infinitely more, right?
Yeah.
It's a start.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about the geotest tech. I want to spend a good amount of time going through that, and I've seen the videos, and I don't know if you still work with Yannick, but I've been a coffee with him a few times, and just like all the 3D stuff he's put together in the videos over the past. So excited to talk about geotests and then share a little bit about that. But to kind of roll back a little bit, so you started out in investment banking, analyzing upstream deals from Morgan Stanley and Bainbridge. Well, that's not, I don't think, the typical entry point for oil and gas, but what did that lens teach you about, the challenges of oil and gas that maybe operators might never come across?
Yeah, I think challenges that operators won't come across is something that I have learned the hard way. The challenges, because as you say, I started in finance. And in that role, putting myself in my 21-year-old mindset, then I'm like, okay, I studied economics. I went to Pepperdine. I'm from San Diego. I have no ties to the oil and gas industry. And I fall into this situation in 2005 to 2008, where my first, you know, real job was at Morgan Stanley. That's when master limited partnerships and upstream oil and gas production, rolling assets into master limited partnerships, a public vehicle to, get production growth. The whole world at that time was running out of oil. This is just before kind of all the oily shale booms start picking up in that time frame. And so I was sourcing deals from just a transactional perspective. Can I put a buyer in front of a seller that has existing production, drilling upside, a 50-50 mix of oil production and gas production, bolt-on acquisitions in the area if you're finding success, all the kind of the typical deal criteria. And so I did that for 10 years in the investment bank. I still have my investment banking registration, but then I went to the operator side. I said I didn't want to be in the finance world per se day to day. I want to run an operation, own production, and that's where you learn about the challenges, which are insane. And so I could talk about that in detail if you want,
Yeah.
as my biologist is calling me right now. And literally while we're talking.
If you need to
Which
take me, you can, Mike.
no, I
We can
don't. I
set everything
don't.
up. Okay.
But that's a great segue to give you the key challenge as a California operator is the California Environmental Quality Act, or
Yeah.
CEQA. It is the
Yeah.
number one challenge that we face, and it's a challenge to adhere to all the environmental standards that it means to be an oil and gas producer, protecting air, water, land. Being a steward of the environment in California is the hardest job I've ever had. And that's the one I chose in 2017 when I became an operator
I mean,
instead of a finance guy.
to me, it's kind. I mean, I like you. I'm a San Diegan. I'm a Californian, born and raised. I won't leave for many reasons. Probably a majority of that reason being my wife is a surfer, and if you grew up surfing, you can't leave it. But I mean, you know, and anyways, I understand the tie that you have to your home state, but it would be a lot easier to go to another state and maybe do the same thing. So I mean, was it really just, "Hey, this is where I'm from and I wanna stick with it," or did you see an opportunity? Because, like, again, you're an
Right.
advocate for
Yeah.
California now.
Yeah.
Did you kinda think through that part of it as well in making that
Yeah.
decision, or did that come later?
Being an advocate definitely came later, and I think it's important to just continue to note that timeline. When I started my career, California, wasn't on a mandate to eliminate oil production in the state of California. It wasn't on a mandate to eliminate every refinery in the state of California. So the whole perspective has changed in Sacramento. And then as I've progressed in my career, back then we were the number three producing state in the country. We were a powerhouse traditionally, dating back to the discovery of oil in the state in the
Mhm.
late 1800s. Fast forward to where we're at today, there's been 130 plus years of really successful track record of producers producing the resource. In the early 1900s, California was the number one producer in the world. We helped win World War II in the Pacific Theater by ramping 42% over World War II. We were a million a day producer before the 80s crisis. And then we become, we're still without, I wouldn't say without trying, but all the way to when Newsom comes in and really shuts everything down, we're still producing 500,000 barrels a day without trying. I mean, those are just slowly declining resources in the state. So that's how I frame my stewardship perspective of, okay, we've continually improved as an industry and beautified the state over 130 years. Why all of a sudden are we bankrupting the state to get on a net zero paper audit of our emissions, not an actual audit, because now we're seeing the Strait of Hormuz close and our 25% imports coming from Saudi and Iraq stranded over there. And now you see the ramifications. So like we've gone from one end of the pendulum to the other. So that's just I can't even answer the question shorter than that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's so many offshoots to where we could go with that,
Right.
but it's anyway. I'll pause, but that's kind of
Yeah.
the setting the table of the environmental perspective.
Well, the word that you use that I love is stewardship, right? And I know California operators and producers have done a fantastic job. And I mean, going back to something that I learned from you, which is a barrel of oil from California is the cleanest barrel of oil on earth, right? I mean, just because of the regulation and all the things that we have to follow and go through. But, you know, I guess it's and this is kind of where it ties into your geotest, and I'm excited to get there as well. But before we get there, I mean, you're obviously you've memorized a lot of fantastic facts, and you understand the landscape really well. About now we have all these refineries closing down as well, and I guess where I'm going with that is you are constantly getting new information in, and I'm curious. what's one thing that no one could prepare you for as you stepped into that advocacy position? Like, you've gone to DC, you've gone to Sacramento, you spent a lot of time with these people, but what is something that like you didn't expect to come across in that position?
Hmm. Uh, I think how hard it is to have a voice that presents something actionable. I still haven't seen a lot. I'm only seeing action from our federal government right now, and and locally, it's just so slow and hard to make change. I think I knew it going in that we've had 20 years of really hard left environmental control over Sacramento in the legislature, but how hard it is for them to act unless it's an absolute crisis is something that I did not have an
Yeah,
appreciation for. But I
it is
never really
bizarre. Yeah.
started speaking out with the intent of being political or influencing politicians more so than just say, hey, this is how hard it is to operate right now, and it's unnecessary. We can produce and protect the environment at the same time. As someone like Wade in the mid continent is watching every day, like, wow, we can achieve records in Texas and Oklahoma in terms of production, and the environment's great there too.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
it doesn't need to be this way. That's the hardest message to relay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't, and again, I know you probably didn't select, everyone looked at you in the room and they're like, man, this Mike guy, we got to get him up there. And then they nominated you to go do all this. So like you probably inadvertently got into that, but it's been fun to watch. And it's funny too. So we haven't had anyone from California on our show to talk about, oil and gas, and mostly because there's not really been much to talk about other than like, man, these headlines are terrible and hard to come through and figure out. I mean, I remember going to SIPA last year, and it kind of felt at that point like I think that kind of the feeling was, okay, we've come to the end of the line. Like this is, we're running into that wall now and things are going to change. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic, like even having Wade in Oklahoma and hearing the stuff that he gets to do compared to over here. So it's just a very interesting dichotomy, and hopefully, and I guess another point too is, you mentioned all the things that we've done in California to in the past historically, and that very well could happen again. It's just going to take the right people in, to make that change happen. And it probably starts, unfortunately, from the political side, right? So we've got a lot coming up on that side of things here in the state, and hopefully we can pull through. So, all right. So we're importing 70% of our oil from places like Iraq and Guyana. What is, if we look at the offshore for a moment, I've seen you talk about Sable offshore quite a bit, and I think Phil Mickelson and you have exchanged some messages as well, which is really cool to see. But offshore, is there any difference in, if we look offshore versus onshore, or is it better? Is it worse? Is it more difficult? Is it the same? Is there anything there that we should be taking note of?
Yeah, I mean, Lefty's probably the most informed golfer. He's definitely the most informed celebrity Californian I've seen talk about oil, and I'm sure he has a strong interest in seeing Sable succeed.
Yeah, right.
The most interesting thing on Guyana and Sable is, yeah, Guyana is an offshore play right now. If it moves onshore, it's moving into the heart of the rainforest. Right now, it sits offshore. And so, the little bit of environmental research I've done on the Guyana barrel, it is our fastest growing import in addition to Brazil, which is mainly offshore production in Brazil. So, why is California sourcing so much product from Guyana and Brazil? It's because it's a heavier crude and it matches what the refineries are set to take in California. So, but they're still flaring offshore tremendous amounts of natural gas, and that's a new resource. So I would imagine until they get some significant gas infrastructure built out there, there's going to be a huge amount of flaring. And the little bit I've researched on Guyana, it those emissions, the heavy ends of those emissions ultimately make it back onshore in the form of rainfall into the Amazon rainforest. So long term, I'm concerned about that for the people in Guyana. I don't know. I haven't studied it in Brazil. And then the other takeaway I'd say from those countries is China is heavily invested in oil and gas production in those countries, as are Exxon, Chevron, the big oil companies, which have to be there to operate and make these plays successful. But then I look at a Sable offshore, and what we know about the Sable offshore production is it reduces natural seep pressure. It produces from that Santa Ynez unit. They have 3 platforms out there, and we've seen studies from UC Santa Barbara over 15 years between the 80s and 90s in coordination with NASA and NOAA and federal agencies and satellite imagery, collecting data showing that the natural seeps, when those platforms were installed by Exxon and when they were producing and ramping up, the natural seeps declined. The reservoir pressure declines because you're producing that barrel out of the reservoir, or those barrels out of the reservoir. You're reducing the amount of seeps. They install hoods in the subsurface, these big hoods that collect the seeps, and then they pull the oil as it separates from oil and water because they have different gravities. So now you're cleaning the ecosystem, the marine ecosystem in the Santa Barbara Channel. You're literally removing all those volatile organic compounds that are naturally seeping out of the reservoir because you're producing it. And it's actually a great example of what we call free market environmentalism, where an oil and gas producer can come in and clean the environment and make thousands of jobs and make product that literally feeds our refineries. So fast forward to turning those platforms were shut down. We can talk about that, but turning them back on today, that's 60,000 barrels a day of production, just like that. And here, when we're looking at the Permian Basin and can we get more out of the record production we're seeing already, I've heard CEOs say, yeah, maybe we can squeak out another 200,000 barrels a day under this war scenario. Maybe we can try to do that. So compare that. Sable is saying, I can give you 60,000 barrels a day just by allowing me to turn on a pipeline. The federal government is saying, well, that's a lot of oil. So that's kind of where it lies with the environment and the local impact.
Yeah, it's been interesting because I have a very limited understanding of how the Fed can control. Fed comes in and the state can't say. It's like that's I think a very interesting conversation to have there, and I don't really know
Mhm.
much about it, but it's been fascinating.
Well, what do you want to know?
Well, I'm curious, like, does the Fed really have the ability to step in and take that kind of control over something like that? Because, like, what I've heard is that okay, Sable's operating in like California water, so it's not Fed like, how does that work? Like, what's the truth behind that? It's very difficult to kind of figure it out with all the
Yeah.
headlines.
So that's a very important distinction. So the Sable platforms are in federal waters, so they're beyond California state waters. So it's federal platform, it's federal infrastructure, it's federal pipeline, it's access, it's federal mineral rights. They're getting paid a tremendous amount for that production. It's a great economic impact to the federal government in the form of the royalty that's being paid. And so it's intrastate pipelines when they turn it on. So the federal government, oversees the platforms, the pipeline connecting it to state water, and then the pipeline that goes really all the way into Pentland Station, which is Central California. So that oil gets piped all the way into Central California, and then it's now making its way south. Chevron El Segundo is refining it. So I think they have absolute total control over the Defense Production Act, and that's what has Sacramento, Governor Newsom, and everybody so pissed off. There is not a damn thing they're going to do about it.
Right. Okay. Uh, I I think I'll sleep a little bit better knowing that, right? Like if it's a great thing to know. And on that subject of refineries, I mean, I think we started the year, or it was last year. I think we had 12 refineries, and I'm probably off on the numbers, but I mean, these are slowly either
Nine.
getting repurposed or okay. So they're slowly being repurposed or shut down. Can you, I guess, where are we currently at with the refinery situation?
We had 9. We saw, what was it, Santa Maria, Phillips 66, transition to biofuel. So
Mhm.
that's shut down, local takeaway for Santa Maria onshore production, which has hurt that area, Santa Barbara. We saw Phillips 66 in Torrance shut down. So that took, I think, 49,000 barrels a day off refining capacity, and it'll become an import terminal importing finished fuels. So the refineries don't go anywhere. Sacramento kind of presents this as, oh, this is going to be great for the local community. Actually, it takes fewer jobs. They shut down the refineries and you get more ships. So you get worse emissions. And now we're seeing Valero Benicia they've stopped refining since January, it's reported. So they're actually formally shutting down coal here completely this month. And so anecdotally, I don't know, there's one station I drove by in San Diego here that the diesel price is turned off. I don't see the green. I meant to say green. The green numbers are off. I think we're going to start with a diesel shortage, and it's going to start with stations around California that are not selling a lot of diesel anyway. They're like, well, I'm not selling a lot of this anyway. It's it's going on $8 a gallon. I'm not going to have it.
Yeah, it's eight. I think it's $8.19 at the station. And granted, the one next to near our home is like I think the highest in the area, but it's still crazy to see that number.
What are you paying, Wade? What are you paying out there for gasoline and diesel?
$1.
High threes. I mean,
Yeah.
to give you an anecdotal story, my son, he's a sophomore in high school. He's got a lot of buddies, they're all getting cars and all that stuff. And one of his best friends got an F-250 diesel from his grandpa in Texas, in California, gifted to him because he just can't afford the diesel price, It's just absolutely crazy. But I mean, that's the situation that we're facing. And, we hear about that stuff and it really does. I mean, it makes me kind of thankful that we don't have a situation like that where we're just constantly having to fight. I mean, I feel like we've got, good protections and good agencies, whether it's the Railroad Commission or the Oklahoma Corporation Commission that are, making the people who maybe wouldn't be the greatest stewards, be good stewards, and meet requirements and make sure that they're operating well. But it's not so prohibitive that we can't go out and drill and produce,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you guys, when you have a problem, you fix it. You had the induced seismicity issues with water injection and, you manage, you say, okay, we gotta cut back our injection. We got to manage it throughout the region. You got to coordinate among operators and the agencies. And that's what is not available to California operators anymore. And I don't think that'll be forever. I think they will have to have us because it's getting back to the refinery issue. It's getting so bad that the federal government is saying, Defense Production Act, we will keep these refineries open. Let's see what happens with Valero. I think there's a strong case to be made with Valero's Benicia refinery providing 100% of the jet fuel to Travis Air Force Base, extend that across 50 military installations across the state of California. You really need the federal government to keep these critical infrastructure pieces in play.
And I think you kind of hit on it earlier whenever you're talking about why people make decisions or why people move. I mean, I feel like whether it's government especially, but even in business and a lot of other things, personal lives even, there's an inertia to change and an inertia to movement. And it's going to take really hitting on a pressure point, some kind of a crisis or something to really drive that change. The other thing too that you were kind of talking about, I mean, it's interesting to me because when you talk about California, you talk about Sacramento, right? And like that's where all the laws and all these things are coming out of. It's really interesting to me because, in Texas, the laws and everything come out of Austin. And I don't think Austin is really representative of kind of what's going on in a lot of other parts of the state. Demographically, it's very different. And on top of that, I mean, I think there's a lot of Californians moving there for probably really great reasons, but there's a part of me that kind of wonders what those, kind of demographic changes are going to result in terms of regulatory changes for oil and gas and kind of how the state functions and operates as well. I don't think it's going to be this huge doom and gloom that a lot of people talk about, but at the same time, I think there can be some very subtle things that happen in there that could result in some kind of boots on the ground, adverse effects for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're right. It's this inertia. And right now, the inertia is almost to a halt. We got down to, I don't know the exact number, 3 drilling rigs drilling for oil and maybe a couple for geothermal. So,
in the whole state,
half a dozen rigs in the whole state was what it was down to. We only drilled 21 new wells everybody likes to talk about permitting, and the permitting, we're going to get 2,000
Yeah.
new drilling permits in Kern County with Governor Newsom signing SB 237. It's like, I don't care how many we can theoretically permit. Imagine putting a cap on any kind of permit for a pub, for, let's say, tomato production. You can only sell, X amount of tons of tomatoes per year. It's like, what?
Right.
It's a ridiculous concept. And so if you look at just what's been drilled, 21 new oil and gas wells were drilled in 2024, or excuse me, 2024 in California, a few more in 2025. And now only 500 permits have been accepted in Kern County so far this year. And we're basically call it halfway through the year. Like operators, the big operators, the Chevron, the CRC, the big independents, they've already gone out and gotten those permits. They're not going to get more permits for this year.
Right.
So you're only going to see a couple hundred wells actually drilled this year in the state of California, which still is historically hundreds of years all-time low. So we're at the inertia. Sacramento shut it down. They shut it down as far as they could shut it down. And now that inertia getting it back up again, as you know, staffing up rigs, getting equipment,
Right.
getting people, getting the money, the investors to come, investors can be like, are you really allowed to do that now before I give you the money?
Yeah.
So this inertia is going to build now. Yeah. Yeah. And what I believe, I'll stop. Sorry, Peter, I'll stop talking on this topic a bit, but we need to really use the next, back to kind of the question on advocacy. We need to really use the next 2.5 years that President Trump remains in office to get the inertia back into California, specifically the California upstream and midstream and downstream, the whole petroleum industry in California. We need to get the federal inertia behind us to get it going again, and getting it, and that's going to be Sable Offshore and unleashing West Kern County and unleashing the LA Basin and unleashing the refineries. We got to get the inertia back. The actual activity is what really matters versus the allowances granted to us by Sacramento.
Well, when I go out and visit Oklahoma and Texas, it's like the culture there is so different too, right? It's just, you land and there's pump jacks right there on the airstrip, it's a whole different animal. I would love to, I guess, learn more about GEOTES. And I've watched, there's a video
Actually,
it is a great segue. I've watched there's a demo video on YouTube, and I'll put the link in there. I don't think it's on the Californians for Energy and Science channel. I think it's on a different one. But I would love to. So where are you at with your GEOTES project, and really maybe give a high level overview of like what the technology actually is, because I've asked if other people have heard about it, and the answer has been no. I've never heard of that. I'd like to learn more. So curious, if you could help kind of fill in some blanks there.
yeah, it's exciting technology. It's upstream oil and gas transitioning, I guess, to geologic thermal energy storage, or GEOTES. And what we know about the oil reservoir is that it's traps oil over geologic time. So you have subsurface faulting and strata that has a container, so to speak. And so that container is the oil reservoir, which we're converting to a battery. And we're doing that by way of drilling production and injection wells into the subsurface at a depth of about 2,000 feet. So our reservoir is about 2,000 feet. If you do put that link up there, people can watch this 4-minute video that explains how this works. But the surface infrastructure that we're using is concentrated solar thermal in the form of parabolic trough mirrors, not the power towers that scorch birds, the Ivanpah project that just went bust. No, this is proven technology. We have over 500 megawatts of nameplate capacity installed on the California Independent System Operator of just this trough technology. So the trough technology has been on the grid for decades, but it does not have cost-effective storage. So the trough technology has become obsolete, or uneconomic as we've had photovoltaic and lithium batteries deployed on the California grid, and those costs come down lower than trough technology. So we take the trough into the oil field. We say, okay, what does the trough need? It needs storage. What does the oil field need? It needs a heat source in California to charge the reservoir. At the surface, we use the trough to heat a working fluid to 700 Fahrenheit. That goes to a heat exchange. When we produce the oil and gas reservoir, we sell the oil. So the oil gets removed as a contaminant from the subsurface battery, and we're left with brackish water. So we're just left with brackish produced water from the reservoir that goes to the heat exchange and gets heated to 500 degrees, and then we inject it. It's a closed loop cycle using only produced water to heat the subsurface porous permeable sandstone reservoir. So we're heating, a block of reservoir at a depth of 2,000 feet, which means no mining lithium, which heats up as Wade's phone is catching fire right now.
Right.
The same thing is happening to the California grid. These lithium batteries, I mean, where you live, there was a SDG&E project that they were trying to put in. It finally got canned, and because those fires they don't burn out until the cells stop catching fire. There's no way to put them out. And so for us, that's all in the subsurface, no fire risk. And what we'll do is once we heat the reservoir to 500 degrees, we'll take it from about 100 degrees to 500 degrees in the subsurface. We then dispatch 500 degree heated water to a separate heat exchange. And on the other end of that is a steam turbine power generation set. So when we turn that on at peak and night, when the California grid needs it, instead of a lithium battery, we can come on for twice the duration, 5 to 6 hours a night. Dispatchable, stabilizes the grid, provides power to the grid, and provides 1,000 hours of storage in the case of a seasonal demand event, or AKA winter time. When there's less sunlight, we could be on for 1,000 hours when a big storm rolls through and covers us with rain, throughout the Central Valley. So that's kind of the long version. The video will explain it in 4 minutes.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of tying in all the market pieces.
Yeah, well, and it's a great visual too. I mean, it takes you underground, it walks you through how everything works and gives you great visuals on that. I'm curious, like I always wanted to ask, like, what's the manpower that you would need to run something like that? Is it just, okay, we're gonna put a big fence around it and it runs on its own, or do you need to have a pumper that goes out there every day to check it? Like, what's that look like?
So, in terms of staffing this, the construction jobs will be thousands, it'll be commercial scale. The day-to-day operations of the company were remote. I envision us corporately staying remote. And then to run it in the field, you're going to have, pumpers out there, technicians out there to monitor. There's a lot of water movement. There will be surface infrastructure, solar infrastructure to maintain. That's routine maintenance. Wellbore maintenance is routine maintenance.
Okay.
But you'll have constant support from production crews and crews that are in the area. So service companies will be deployed throughout the year, whatever that maintenance protocol looks like, and how often we'll need to do that kind of field work. But it's a lot. It's a lot of moving pieces.
I'd imagine. So, but you're still very much in the wheelhouse of oil and gas, right? Because I guess what I'm looking at is this creating a type of job where, man, we have to go learn a whole new set. It sounds like the skills are very much transferable. So that's at least a good thing to kind of think through. It's not like you're reinventing the wheel entirely.
Yeah, the beauty of GEOTES is it's supporting oil and gas jobs with traditional, drilling opportunities and production rig work. It's supporting anything related to the CST, the concentrated solar thermal. So that's even more jobs, pipe fitters, workers, electricians. And then it's the geothermal power generation. So then you're, talking, power generation equipment and turbines and all this, cool power plant opportunity. So it's jobs on tops of jobs on tops of jobs.
Yeah. It's awesome. I mean, because you look at when you talk to people that are, producers and operators, and you start talking about, okay, hey, we got talking about lithium batteries, right? Going back to that, because I think it's just or wind or solar. It is a different type of of energy production. And so
Very
a lot of
yeah.
it feels like there's almost a split in the room. Maybe not necessarily like they disagree with it, but it is like, hey, that's a different kind of industry entirely than what we're doing. But it
Mhm.
sounds like GEOTES sits like right in the middle of everything, and it's a
Yeah.
really cool thing to see. So
Yeah, it's a bipartisan technology, you know?
it is,
We
yeah,
were awarded money under the Biden administration, we're approved under Trump. I mean,
yeah,
it's win-win. And
right,
even with a win-win technology, Sacramento still can't move. I mean, that's how ridiculous it is.
yeah. If there was a marketing slogan, that's the one I go with. Is yeah,
Absolutely.
permitted under Biden and approved under Trump is
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
absolutely.
I love it. Oh, that's fantastic. So I'll have the video up. So we'll kind of get to some practical things here. So when you and I think we first met maybe a year and a half ago, we were talking about you're like consuming or buying local oil, and sort of along the vein of like a cultural thing in California is like we got to buy everything organic. And I know everyone out there thinks we're a bunch of hippies that just kind of hang out and go surfing all day, but we're actually trying to make moves over here in the energy industry too. So but we practically can't buy local energy at this point because the
Mhm.
reality is we just don't have it. So like how should we be like if you were a consumer, you are a consumer in California, how are you thinking through, where your energy is coming from? And, if you had to go on next door and post something, in your local community, what would you be sharing with the people that are in your particular neighborhood? Is there anything that maybe we're missing or not talking about?
Yeah, they can anybody can follow me on X, Mike Umbro. I'm not anonymous. So I just
Yeah.
posted a video this morning about the story out of Iran and Iraq that Fox News covered yesterday, $800 million of Iranian crude oil being hidden in Iraqi tankers that are spoofing or turning off their transponders and trying to move Iranian barrels. And we've imported 276 million Iraqi barrels over the past 4 years. So, how many of those barrels were Iranian? What's happening? What are we really accomplishing with our climate goals? And what is Sacramento doing to be helpful in this global conflict? Just saying President Trump caused a war in Iran and prices to spike. Well, we're uncovering a lot of truths about the California ecosystem and where we're sourcing petroleum products, and it's not looking good for the environment, and it's not looking good for the consumers that are getting just ruined by $6 gasoline, $7.50 diesel. And they can, the general public can go on our website, energy and science, energyandscience.com, and look at Unleash California 2026 tab. And we're posting reports on the California energy emergency, reports out of Professor Rector at UC Cal Berkeley, from Michael Miche at UC Marshall School, from Sean Hyatt on the power crisis from the USC Marshall School. So that's a great resource if people want to just go find those documents and load them up into Chat GPT. If you want the easiest way to do it, download them from us, load them up in Chat GPT and say, start asking questions. That's the easiest way to inform yourself. And it's really terrifying. I think that's the power of AI in advocacy too, is if we can get the common person that's starting to use AI to just uncover how the world works. It's not a good place for California, specific to Sacramento's implementation of cap and trade or cap and invest and all these regulations that are shutting down refining. It's not good. It's not good.
Yeah. I would like to say, first of all, your website overhaul looks fantastic. The amount of
Nice.
information on there, second to none, man. I
Yeah.
mean, you have this more reports than I could spend time going
Yeah.
through, and it's like man, yeah, that's the
Looking
connection
good.
there. Yeah, it's doing good. You guys are doing fantastic there. I have like maybe one or two more things, but
Sure.
is there something in the intersection of energy economics and environmental policy that we're not talking about but should be? So if you look at sort of like obviously the economics in California is different, but like looking at Kern County, I think that it adds I think $4.6 billion to their economy there just in Kern alone.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
is there anything there that we should be thinking about, especially with energy economics and environmental policy?
Absolutely. This is a great segue because we just had this report, Fueling Kern County. the contribution of oil and gas workers on Kern County's economy. And this was done through Californians for Energy and Science and Cal State Bakersfield, but it says, exactly what you're saying. It's $4 billion of economic impact to just Kern County. So you look at that, the refineries in Benicia, Valero shutting down, that's multi-billion-dollar impact to the city of Benicia. And so it's 8% of the GDP of Kern County. It's a huge percent of the GDP of the state of California. Professor Miche talks about this. If we're shutting down the energy producers in California, we're shutting down the whole economy, because it's the leading indicator of an economy is the energy economy. You want that to be vibrant. You want people using energy. You want people employing people. You want it staying within our state economy. So yeah, I encourage people to check that out too. We're going to load that up on the website. So
Look forward to it. In terms of careers, right? If I was in my 20s, and I know you're very involved, like Pepperdine and Berkeley, you're talking all over with these students. What's the mindset of these students? Because I would
Mhm,
look at energy and be like, well, California is not a place I'm going to go for the education on that. Turns
mhm,
out Berkeley's got some fantastic professors and brilliant minds that are thinking through a lot of this stuff. I mean, I talked to a couple of the students, texting on a regular basis, and they like to send me pictures of stuff that they're doing. And it's really cool.
mhm.
But what's the mindset of the students? Like, like where are they at? Because I think it's such a great thing that you can sort of imprint your thoughts and the
Right.
direction early in their education.
Yeah, it's so true. And I spoke to a group of, I don't know, it was probably 20 or 30 in a classroom. I was supposed to be there in person, but I was sick last week. But they're 30 kids at 7 p.m. No, it was 8 o'clock
Yeah.
at night, wanting to hear about my project. And these are, mechanical engineers, chemical engineers, electrical engineers, you name it, the civil engineers, environmental engineers. These are the biggest and brightest minds coming up in our university system at the top school in the state, or schools in the state. USC is a great school as well, and Pepperdine with public policy and what they're doing in energy. They want to know where they're going to get jobs. That's how I kind of lead them to this holistic environmental perspective of saying, if you shut down the oil industry or any industry in the state of California, where are you
Yeah.
going to go get a job? And
Right.
these are the students, like, obviously not everybody goes to college with this intent and purpose. These are the students that are going to have top jobs the day they graduate. That's what they want to have. And that's what is not available to them in California. And they ask me, am I going to be able to work in an AI type job in California? Because right now I'm getting offers from Google in Austin, Texas, but I'm not getting offers from Google, in San Diego, which Google has a big presence down here, or in the Bay Area at their campus in Palo Alto or wherever they are.
Right. Yeah.
People want to stay here. These kids they grew up in the best climate in the world. They want to stay here, and they want to know there's job opportunities here. So I think that's the best way that we can educate them on the benefits, the tremendous benefits of our industry, which far outweigh the costs of the environmental costs. But currently, the way it's been presented to these students over the past two generations has been, don't allow energy production in this form or fashion, because it's gonna be bad for the environment. It's actually not true. It's really bad for the environment not to produce local energy.